Alpha King Kalen Ashvale sat in the head steward's office, trying very hard not to look like the most powerful wolf in 7 territories, had just been defeated by 3 small children. His head steward Aldrich, a beta of 60 years with the patience of a man who had survived 4 reigns, set down his ledger and looked at the king with the expression of someone delivering news they had been dreading. That, Aldrich said, was the 6th caretaker in 2 months. Kalen said nothing. The last one, the Coldwater Pack female, trained in youth management for 15 years. She filed a formal account before she left. She said, and I want to read this correctly. Aldrich found the page. She said your cubs attempted to establish pack dominance by cornering her in the pantry and refusing to release her until she submitted. She was in there for 40 minutes. They are spirited, Kalen said. They are terrors, Aldrich said, with the gentle precision of a man who had been around long enough to say true things to kings. Spirited cubs test limits. Your cubs dismantled the entire nursery wing's furniture arrangement and recreated it as a defensive fortification. They roared a trained war veteran female into tears. She was new to cubs. She survived 3 border campaigns. Kalen was quiet. The truth was this. His cubs were extraordinary. Soren, aged 7, already showing the tactical intelligence that ran in the Ashvale bloodline. Mira, aged 6, who had the specific observational precision of someone who noticed everything and filed it away for later use. And little Cass, aged 4, who appeared harmless until you realized that everything around him had been subtly rearranged to serve his purposes. Their mother had died when Cass was an infant. Kalen had been running a territory and raising 3 alpha-blooded cubs alone ever since, and the cubs had, in the absence of a consistent authority figure, developed the kind of creative independence that made every caretaker the palace sent to them reconsider their career. I have a candidate, Aldrich said carefully. She transferred from the southern border settlements last month. She specifically requested difficult cases. Her words were, and I want you to hear this because it tells you something important about this person. She said boring children made her want to pull her own fur out. Kalen blinked. She said that. In the formal application. She's Omega? Unranked Omega. No pack bond. She came from the Greywood settlement schools where she apparently managed 40 children of 12 species in a classroom with no staff. She has no formal nobility credentials, no palace experience, no... Send her, Kalen said. Aldrich paused. My lord, she has no... Send her, Kalen repeated. The ones with credentials have been leaving in under a week. Send me the one who asks for the difficult cases. Aldrich made a note. One thing, he said. She's not what the court would consider. I don't need the court to approve of my cub's caretaker, Kalen said. I need someone who won't be in the pantry for 40 minutes. Yes, my lord. And Aldrich. My lord? Tell her what she's walking into. Aldrich's expression suggested she already knew. Wren arrived at the palace's east wing at the 7th bell of morning, carrying a worn leather satchel and wearing the practical clothes of someone who had made peace with the fact that their work would end the day with something on it. She was 26 years old, dark-haired, the kind of face that was easy to underestimate until you'd seen it stay completely level during a situation where everyone else was running. She had been warned. The head steward had been thorough. 3 cubs. Ashvale bloodline, the dominant line of the most powerful pack in 7 territories. Mother deceased 3 years ago. Father the Alpha King, present but governing, which meant present in the way that a storm was present. You were always aware of it, but it wasn't available for conversation. The previous 6 caretakers had lasted an average of 11 days. Wren had read the incident reports during the carriage ride to the palace. She had found them more useful than alarming. The nursery wing was on the 3rd level. The head steward walked her up and briefed her with the specificity of a man filing a military report. The eldest, Soren, leads the others. He tests every authority figure on the first day. If you show weakness, he catalogs it and uses it for the rest of your tenure. And if you don't show weakness? We have limited data on that outcome, Aldrich said. He's 7. He's very good at finding it. What does Mira do? Mira watches. She doesn't engage directly until she's decided something. Then she acts. We've found this to be more concerning than Soren's direct approach. And Cass? Aldrich paused at the nursery door. Cass is 4 years old and has rearranged the furniture in every room he's been confined to. We don't fully understand his system yet, but the previous caretaker believed it was strategic. It probably is, Wren said. Aldrich looked at her. 4-year-olds are underestimated, she said. They notice everything. They just don't have the language to explain what they're doing yet. Aldrich opened the nursery door. The 3 cubs were inside. Soren stood in the center of the room with his arms crossed, his posture already doing the specific work of a 7-year-old who had been told someone new was coming and had prepared accordingly. He was dark-haired like his father, with the same gray eyes that were currently doing a very deliberate assessment of everything about her. Mira was at the window. She didn't turn around when Wren entered. She was either unconcerned or more concerned than anyone else in the room and disguising it. Wren cataloged this and moved on. Cass was sitting in the center of an arrangement that Wren immediately understood was not random. The furniture had been moved. The toys were distributed in a pattern. He was at the center of it, apparently playing quietly, but he looked up when she came in with the sharp-eyed attention of someone who had been waiting. Aldrich introduced her, left. The door closed. Wren set her satchel down. Soren took a breath, puffed out his 7-year-old chest, and produced a growl. It was impressive for 7. Real resonance in it. She could see he'd been practicing. Wren looked at him. She tilted her head slightly, and she growled back. Not a scream, not a yell. A full, low, controlled sound that came from the diaphragm, the kind of sound that took practice to produce and that most people didn't know an Omega could make because most people had never pushed an Omega far enough to find out. It wasn't louder than his. It didn't need to be. It was steadier. Soren's growl stopped. His ears, the small, slightly pointed ears of an alpha bloodline cub, flattened involuntarily. Mira turned from the window. Cass stopped pretending to play. The room was very quiet. "All right," Wren said in her normal voice, as if the previous 10 seconds hadn't happened. "My name is Wren. You can call me Wren or Miss Wren or Hey You. I genuinely don't mind. But here's what's going to happen." She sat down cross-legged on the floor, bringing herself to their level. "You are going to test me. This is normal. This is healthy. I'm not here to make you act like something you're not. I'm here to keep you alive, teach you things worth knowing, and make sure none of us has a terrible time doing it." She looked at Soren. "You just growled at me." "Yes," he said with the cautious dignity of a 7-year-old recalibrating. "Why?" A pause. "To see what you'd do." And he looked at her with the gray eyes that were, she noted with a separate stored part of her attention, exactly his father's. "You growled back." "Yes, because I'm not prey. I'm also not a threat. I'm something else." "What?" "The person who decides how interesting the next month is going to be," Wren said. "And I can make it very interesting, or very boring. The boring version involves a lot of sitting quietly and reviewing pack law texts. The interesting version involves..." She reached into her satchel and produced 3 small, carved wooden figures she'd made during the carriage ride. "Strategy games, tracking exercises, and things your previous caretakers didn't know." Mira had moved closer. She hadn't realized she was doing it. Cass stood up from his arrangement and walked directly to Wren. He looked at the carved figures. "What things?" he asked. "Things that make you better at being what you already are," she said. "You're Ashvale-blooded. Dominant lineage. You're going to be formidable. The question is whether you're going to be formidable and foolish, or formidable and clever." Cass took one of the carved figures. Mira took another. Soren waited 2 seconds. The specific 2 seconds of a child maintaining dignity, then took the third. "What's the game?" Mira asked. Wren smiled. "First, tell me about the furniture arrangement. Cass, you moved it. What's the system?" Cass looked at her with sudden, complete attention. "You noticed," he said. "I notice things," she said. "Tell me." And Cass, who had not explained his system to anyone because no one had ever asked, began to explain. The first week was a negotiation conducted almost entirely without direct statement. Soren tested her on the second morning by refusing to attend the lesson period she'd established. He simply didn't come. Sat in the corner of the playroom and watched her with crossed arms. Ren ran the lesson for Mira and Cass. Made it interesting enough that Soren could hear exactly what he was missing. By mid-morning, he was sitting at the table. She said nothing about it. Mira tested her differently, by being entirely cooperative on the surface while quietly measuring everything Ren did. How she responded to the cubs. What she noticed and what she didn't. What she cared about. On the fourth day, Mira said casually, "You watch Papa the same way I watch people." Ren looked at her. "What do you mean?" "When he comes by in the evening. You track where he is in the room, but you don't look directly." "Your father is the Alpha King," Ren said evenly. "I'm aware of where he is in a room." "But it's not fear," Mira said. "It's different. Fear looks a certain way. That's not how you look." Ren held Mira's gaze. "You're very observant." "I know," Mira said, and went back to her lesson. Ren filed this away. Cass's furniture system, she had learned, was a defensive architecture. He had taken every room he'd been in and arranged it so that he had maximum visibility of the entrance and maximum access to exits. He was 4 years old, and he had been doing this instinctively since his mother died. She didn't tell him to stop. She asked him to teach her his system instead. They spent an afternoon rearranging the nursery together, Cass explaining his logic with the focused intensity of a child who had never been taken seriously about something that mattered to him. "Here," he said, positioning a chair. "If you sit here, you see the door, and the window, and the corner where Soren hides when he's planning something." "That's good tactical positioning," Ren said. Cass looked at her to see if she was being genuine. She was. He repositioned another piece. "My father sits the same way," he said. "At every table. He always faces the door." "Your father is a king," Ren said. "Kings develop habits like that. Will I be a king?" "You'll be something," she said. "What you are depends on what you practice." Cass thought about this seriously. "I practice noticing things," he said. "Yes," she said. "I know. Keep doing that." The breakthrough with Soren came in the second week. He had been improving, gradually, grudgingly, with the specific grace of a 7-year-old alpha who was finding it harder to maintain hostility towards someone who kept being right about things. The incident happened over a lesson about pack leadership. Ren had been teaching from historical records, using case studies of pack decisions and their outcomes, when Soren said, abruptly, without preamble, "My father doesn't sleep." She paused. "What do you mean?" "I can see the light under his study door every night. Late. He's always working. Kings have significant responsibilities. Mother used to make him stop." He said it without looking at her. She'd come to the study and make him close the ledgers. He'd argue, and she'd wait, and eventually he'd come. Ren was quiet. "He doesn't have anyone to make him stop now," Soren said. "No," she said. "He doesn't." "That doesn't seem right." "No," she agreed. "It doesn't." Soren looked at her for a moment. The gray eyes were too old for 7 in the specific way of children who have seen something they didn't have language for and are still carrying it. "Are you going to fix it?" he asked. "That's not my place," she said. "But you could." "Soren." "You could," he said again, and went back to the lesson. She sat with that for a long time after the cubs were in bed. Alpha King Kalen Ashvale had been aware of the new caretaker in the way that Alpha Kings were aware of new people in their household, as a presence that needed to be assessed for risk and filed accordingly. He had expected to file her quickly. She had lasted longer than anyone else. He noted this. He noted also, from the reports Aldrich brought him, from the quality of the cubs' behavior at the rare dinners where he sat with them, from the specific way Cass now explained his furniture arrangements to anyone who would listen, that something had changed in the nursery wing. Something he didn't entirely have a name for. He began passing by the nursery wing on his late rounds. Not stopping, not entering, just passing. The first time he heard Ren's voice carrying through the door. "Soren, strength without strategy is noise. Give me the strategy." And Soren, his 7-year-old who had growled 6 trained adults out of the palace, saying, "All right, if we come from the eastern approach rather than the direct route." He stood in the corridor for 30 seconds. then walked on. The second time, he arrived at the door to hear Mira's voice, high and focused. "But you knew he'd choose the northern option. You always know." And Ren, "I don't always know. I read the pattern. They're different things. Knowing is certainty. Pattern reading is probability. One closes your mind, the other keeps it open." The third time, he arrived to find the door slightly ajar and the lesson in progress, and he stopped because Cass was standing on a chair doing a full tactical briefing of the nursery's defensive perimeter to a rapt audience of his two siblings, and Ren was sitting on the floor listening with the focused attention of someone who found this genuinely interesting. "The weakness," Cass was explaining, "is the east window. The latch is loose. Anyone who wanted to enter without being seen would come from there." "What do we do about weaknesses in a position?" Ren asked. "Fix them or use them," Cass said immediately. "If you can't fix them, you make sure you're the one who knows about them first." Kalen stood in the corridor outside the slightly open door and felt something happen in his chest that took him a moment to identify. It was the specific warmth of watching someone see his children. Not manage them, not contain them, see them. He pushed the door open slightly further. Ren looked up immediately. Mira had been right. She tracked the room without appearing to, and found him in the doorway. Their eyes met. She didn't look alarmed. She didn't perform the specific flurry of standing and bowing that his presence usually triggered in household staff. She simply held his gaze for a moment, then looked at the cubs. "Gentlemen, my lady, your father is in the doorway." All three cubs turned. Kalen stepped into the room. "Papa," Cass said, climbing down from his chair with dignity, "I was teaching the tactical briefing you do at council." "I heard," Kalen said. "Your analysis of the window weakness was accurate." Cass's whole face changed. Kalen looked at Ren, who had stood, not with the flurried deference, but with the simple courtesy of a person acknowledging a new presence in the room. "My lord," she said. "Ren," he said. He had learned her name from the incident reports, which had read, compared to every other incident report, almost peacefully. "How are they progressing?" "Quickly," she said. "They're intelligent cubs. They were underoccupied. They had a great deal of energy directed toward making caretakers leave because that was the most interesting challenge available." He looked at her. "You gave them a more interesting challenge," he said. "I gave them the ones they were built for," she said. The court had opinions about the Omega caretaker in the nursery wing. They formed them with the efficiency of an institution that had been producing opinions for several hundred years and had the machinery well established. The consensus? Unsuitable. Unbonded Omega from a border settlement with no formal credentials, no nobility status, no appropriate standing to be in daily close proximity to the royal heirs. The cub's development required someone of proper rank and training. The Alpha King was grieving and not thinking clearly about what was appropriate. Lord Vorn, senior council lord, primary architect of the faction that had spent 3 years lobbying for the cubs to be sent to formal pack schooling under approved instructors, brought the matter formally to the council within the month. He did it carefully. He was always careful. "The Alpha King's children are the heirs to the Ironmark line," Vorn said in the council chamber to the assembled lords. "Their caretaking requires formal qualification, proper rank, and appropriate credentials. The current appointment is effective," said Commander Rin, who sat on Kalen's left and who had the specific expression of a man who was done being diplomatic. "The current appointment is effective. The cub's behavior has improved significantly by every measurable account." "Improvement in behavior is not the relevant standard." "What is the relevant standard, Lord Vorn?" Rin said. "Because we've had 6 credentialed, ranked, formally appropriate caretakers in this position in 2 months. None of them are still here. The one who is still here came from a border settlement school and is unranked, and the cubs are learning tactical analysis, pack history, and, I had someone verify this, 3 dialects. The Alpha King's heirs cannot be left in the hands of someone they actually listen to." The chamber was quiet. Kalen, at the head of the table, had been watching this exchange with the specific stillness of a man who had already made his decision and was giving others the space to reach it themselves. "Lord Vorn?" he said. Vorn stopped. "The caretaker remains," Kalen said. "If you have concerns about the development of my heirs, Put them in writing, and they will be reviewed. The appointment is not under council jurisdiction. My lord, the appointment is not under council jurisdiction, Kalen said again. The quiet in his voice was the kind that ended conversations. Vorn sat down. The council moved to other matters. Rin caught Kalen's eye afterward, as the chamber was clearing. He's not done, Rin said quietly. I know, Kalen said. He'll try to go around the appointment directly. Find something in her background, a technical breach of household protocols. And make sure nothing is in her background that constitutes a breach, Kalen said. Review her appointment terms formally and make them ironclad. Rin looked at him for a moment. You're protecting the caretaker. I'm protecting my children's stability, Kalen said. Yes, Rin said. Of course. Ren found out about the council challenge from Aldrich, who told her with the apologetic efficiency of a man who believed she deserved to know. She took the information with the same level expression she brought to most things. Then she went to find Soren. He was in the study corner they'd established for his independent work, a small table by the window where he worked through the strategic problems she set him. He looked up when she came in. She sat across from him. Someone on your father's council doesn't want me here, she said. Soren was 7. She did not speak to him like he was less than he was. Vorn? Soren said immediately. He's been trying to send us away since Mama died. He thinks we need formal instruction. He might not be wrong about the formal instruction, she said. But his reasons matter. Why does he want you away from the palace? Soren thought. This was one of the things she'd noticed about him. He didn't answer until he'd actually thought. Because we're here, he said slowly. Because Papa has to think about us, and that means he's not only thinking about what Vorn wants him to think about. Yes, she said. So if you leave, then there's more disruption. A new search, a period where your father is managing the transition. Vorn benefits from disruption. Soren looked at her. Will you leave? Not unless your father sends me, she said. But I wanted you to know this is happening, because you're 7 and you deserve to understand what's happening around you. What should we do? Nothing, she said. Your father knows. He's handling it. How do you know he knows? Because your father knows everything that happens in this palace, she said. He just sometimes has to pretend he doesn't for political reasons. Soren considered this. Like when you pretend not to notice Cass rearranging things. Exactly, she said. Some things work better if you let them run rather than interrupting them. Soren nodded. Then, I'm glad you're not leaving. Good, she said. Now show me where you are on the Northern Territory case study. Act 5, the evening and the door. 3 weeks after her arrival, Ren was in the nursery wing at the late bell, returning a borrowed text to the corridor bookshelf when she passed the Alpha King's study. The light was under the door. She stood in the corridor for a moment. She thought about Soren, saying he doesn't have anyone to make him stop now with his 7-year-old face and his 2 old eyes. She was very aware that this was not her place. She was also aware that she had spent her entire career doing things that were not her formal place, because someone needed to, and she was there. She knocked. A pause. Enter. She opened the door. Kalen looked up from the desk, which was covered in territorial maps and correspondence in the manner of a man who had been working since before dawn and would work until after midnight. He looked at her with the gray eyes that his children had inherited, and the specific quality of alert intelligence that, she had to be honest with herself, she had been noticing for 3 weeks. Ren, he said. My lord. She stood in the doorway. I apologize for the interruption. I was returning a text to the corridor shelf and saw your light. It's late for returning texts. The cubs are asleep. I work late. He looked at her. What did you need? Nothing, she said. I wanted to say, your son, Soren. He's been asking questions about pack leadership decisions, historical cases. He's not studying them the way most children study them, as events that happened. He's studying them as models. Models for what? For what he'll have to do someday, she said. He understands what he is. He's been understanding it since before I arrived. He's just been doing it without She paused, without anyone to study alongside. Kaelin was quiet. He needs you, she said. Not gently, not as a softened suggestion. Simply, as a fact. Not the King version. The version that talks to him about Northern Territory case studies at the window in the evening. He's 7. He won't have many years left of being 7. The study was quiet. You're telling me, Kaelin said slowly, that I'm spending too much time governing. I'm telling you that Soren watches your study door every night, she said. And he knows which correspondence stack on your desk is urgent and which is political theater. And he said, when I asked how he knew, that his mother had taught him to read your desk from across the room so she could tell when you needed to stop. Kaelin was very still. He was 4 when she died, Wren said. 5, Kaelin said. His voice came out different from the formal register. Lower. He was 5. He remembers more than I... He stopped. Children remember more than we realize, she said. They remember everything that mattered. They just don't always have the language yet. A long silence. You should go, he said. Not unkindly, the voice of a man who needed the conversation to stop before something happened that he wasn't ready for. Yes, she said. Good night, my lord. She pulled the door closed. She stood in the corridor for a moment. Behind the door, she heard the sound of correspondence being set aside. Then footsteps. Then, quietly, the door to the study opened again. Kaelin stood in the doorway. Thank you, he said, very quietly, in the voice that had nothing to do with the Alpha King. She looked at him. You're welcome, she said, and walked back toward the nursery wing. The following evening, Soren's study lamp was on at the 9th bell when there was a knock at the door. He opened it. His father stood there in his working clothes, not the formal robes, the plain wool he wore when he wasn't being the Alpha King in the formal sense. He had a case study text under his arm, the one about the Coldwater succession. Wren says you're working through the Northern Territory decisions, Kaelin said. Soren stared at him. She said you had questions about the 3rd council vote, Kaelin said. I was there. I can tell you what actually happened. Soren opened the door wider. They sat at the small window table for 2 hours. Wren heard about it the next morning when Soren arrived at lessons and said, without preamble, My father explained why the 3rd vote went the way it did. You were right. The written record is incomplete. It usually is, she said. He said he'd come again tonight. Good, she said. Did you do that? Soren asked. On purpose? She looked at him. Your father came because he wanted to, she said. I just mentioned that you were there. Soren studied her with the gray eyes that were already, at 7, as good at reading things as his father's. You are very sneaky, he said. I learned from someone who knows his own system, she said, and looked at Cass. Cass, who had been repositioning a chair at the window, looked up. I'm not sneaky, he said. I'm strategic. Those are the same thing, Mira said. Are not. Are. Wren let them argue for precisely 30 seconds, which was exactly how long it took to resolve itself naturally. Then, lesson. Soren, you're starting. Tell Mira and Cass what you learned last night about the Northern vote. Soren began. Lord Vorn's formal challenge to Wren's appointment was reviewed by the Palace Administrative Council 6 weeks after her arrival. The review found no breach of household protocol. The appointment terms, which Aldrich had quietly formalized at the Alpha King's direction 3 weeks earlier, were ironclad. The challenge was dismissed. Vorn did not bring it to the council chamber again. He understood, with the instincts of a man who had been reading political situations for 40 years, that the ground had shifted in a way he hadn't anticipated and would need time to reassess. What had shifted? The Alpha King had begun attending the occasional lesson in the nursery wing. Not as an observer. As a participant, sitting at the table with his cubs, working through the case studies Wren set, answering their questions with the directness of someone who had stopped separating his king self from his father self in that specific context. The cubs, in turn, had become, there was no other accurate word, settled. Not subdued, not tamed. Settled in the way of young things that have found their ground and can grow from it rather than spending their energy finding it. Soren had stopped testing every authority figure he met. He tested ideas instead, which was considerably more productive. Mira had begun contributing in the council lessons, with the analytical precision that made the senior lords, who occasionally observed, look at each other sideways. And Cass had accepted that his furniture arrangements could stay as long as he could explain the tactical logic, which he always could. The evening she found Kaelin already in the nursery when she arrived, sitting on the low chair where she usually sat, Cass in his lap explaining the current defensive layout, Soren and Mira arguing about which historical pack leader had demonstrated superior tactical flexibility. She stopped in the doorway. He looked up. She didn't say anything. Neither did he. She came in, sat at the table, and joined the lesson. At the end of the evening, when the cubs were in bed and the nursery was quiet, Kaelin stayed rather than leaving immediately the way he usually did. He stood at the window, looking at the palace courtyard below. "Mira told me," he said without turning around, "that you don't look at me the way afraid people look at things." Ren looked at his back. "Mira is very observant. She said it was something different." "Mira is 6 years old," Ren said. "I wouldn't read too much into, what would you call it?" he said. She was quiet. He turned from the window. The gray eyes, the ones all three of his children had inherited, the ones she had been aware of since the first time she'd stood in a doorway and found them watching her, looked at her directly. "Ren," he said. "My lord." "You knocked on my study door at the late bell." "Yes." "You told me things I needed to hear." "Yes." "You've been here 6 weeks," he said. "And He stopped, started differently. "I have not been able to sit in that nursery and simply be their father. Since their mother died. I've managed them, governed the household around them. But simply being there, was something I stopped knowing how to do." "You were there last night," she said. "Because you made it possible," he said. "You gave them a context where I could be a person rather than a king." She held his gaze. "They did that," she said. "They opened the door. Ren." She stopped. "Accept what I'm telling you," he said, simply. The specific directness of a man who had been a king so long that he didn't know how to be indirect about the things that mattered. "You changed something. I'm telling you that it was significant." She looked at him for a long moment. "All right," she said. "You're welcome." The corner of his mouth moved. Almost a smile. Not quite, but almost. "Soren's going to ask you tomorrow why I was smiling at breakfast," he said. "He'll ask you directly," she said. "He always does." "What should I tell him?" She picked up her satchel from the table. "Tell him," she said at the door, "that strength without intelligence is noise, and that you're learning." She left. Behind her, in the quiet nursery wing, the Alpha King of Ironmark stood at the window for a long time, and when he went back to his study, the correspondence stayed on the desk. The light went out before the late bell. It was the first time in 3 years. In the morning, Soren noticed. The cubs growled. She growled back. And the Alpha King, who had managed a territory and a grief and 3 impossible children alone for 3 years, froze. Not because she was threatening, because she was the first person in 3 years who had walked into that nursery and seen all 4 of them. The children. And the father who didn't know how to stop being a king long enough to sit at a table with his son. She saw all of it. And she stayed. That was the whole of it. She stayed.